Together we have made history. Together we have secured a strong, historic third majority mandate.
Well, based on polling, I can't say that this result is surprising, but Doug Ford's Conservative Ontario government has once again secured a majority. In fact, the third consecutive majority, and that's with 43% of the vote and a turnout that resulted in 45% of voters. So 43% of 45% is why Doug Ford has another majority government. Don't you love first past the post? So in this video, I'm going to break down what exactly happened here, what this election was really about, as well as a couple of examples that I haven't touched on in, I don't think, any of my recent videos around Doug Ford. But worth mentioning before I get into that, since I mentioned my recent videos, I'm often told after elections in Canada that it is my fault. The result is because, David, you didn't cover this enough. So I want to remind people that the search function is on YouTube. If you go to the YouTube URL on your computer, type in Doug Ford right there, and you can see the many times I have covered Doug Ford and Ontario politics. And this is despite the fact that my channel is about American and Canadian news, politics, and culture. I have found lots of time to cover Doug Ford and the many scandals and problems. So there you go. But let's get to this election. So Elections Ontario announced that the estimated cost of this election is $189 million, which is up 30% from its previous budget in 2022. So a big old waste of money, because what is the result in this election? Almost the exact same as last time. So Doug Ford's PCs will likely hit 80 seats. The NDP at 27, Liberals at 14, Green at 2. 43% of the vote share gets you a majority in a first past the post system. Quite ridiculous. But compare that to the last election, where Doug Ford just got 3 more seats last time. So he lost 3 seats, at least where votes currently are. He lost 3 seats compared to last time. What was the point of this election? He already had a majority. So let's be clear, and I think Doug Ford voters can acknowledge this, would acknowledge this. This election was simply about Doug Ford. It was simply about his desire to find the right time to be able to extend his majority for a couple more years than he would have had if the election was a bit later. That's why this election happened, because there was no other point to it. Worth mentioning, the voter turnout last time was 44%. Wow. So a second majority, 44%. And the turnout this time, 45%. Whoa. Ontario, you impress me. Up 1%. Get out and vote next time, please. Just at least if Ford has a majority in an election where there's like a 70% turnout, at least I could sit with that a little better. But when the majority is 43% of 45%, I'm sorry, but that's insane. Like, this is just a stupid system. We're way past due for a new electoral system, but here we are. Worth mentioning, this election took place during several snowstorms. So CTV News writing here, Ontario voters with disabilities face barriers in winter election. The picture kind of says it all here. This was a terrible time to have an election. And that also goes to low turnout here. And just worth mentioning, since we're on that point, assistant rates punishingly inadequate in Ontario. Doug Ford's government has canceled several increases in social assistance rates. So there have been a lot of criticisms about how little people in Ontario get on ODSP. And, you know, his whole attitude towards people on ODSP is like, the fact that he had this election now and doesn't care about these kinds of voters is not surprising at all. Let's get to first some knowledge. So I saw this. This was shared by my buddy Miles, so shout out to him. But this is Reliable Raven here, breaking down the responsibilities between the federal government, the provincial government, and local government. I think it's important to screenshot this, take a note of this. I will link to this below the video so people understand where to put your blame. It is not Trudeau's fault that you can't find a family doctor. That is provincial jurisdiction. So briefly here, provincial responsibilities, colleges and universities, education, hospitals and healthcare, natural resources, property and civil rights, provincial law and courts, provincial parks, provincial road maintenance, provincial taxes, social services. Got it? So now we can better understand what is Doug Ford's fault. So as they break down here, Ford has been the premier since 2018. Let's go through some of these issues, and I'm going to pinpoint a couple of them in a minute here. Froze wage increases, removed paid sick days, cut $21 billion in healthcare spending, voiced plans to privatize healthcare, and has done so in several ways through outsourcing nursing as well as allowing the expansion of private clinics. Denied scale of doctor shortage, despite 2.5 million Ontarians lacking a family doctor. Cut funding from daycare centers that are not in the $10 a day program. That $10 a day program, by the way, was brought in by the federal government and is the reason why your daycare costs have been cut in half, as mine have. Dropped Ontario's core education funding by $1,500 per student since 2018, made cuts to special education teaching, removed 7,400 acres of protected land from the Greenbelt. That was after he promised that he would not do that, said that on camera several times and went ahead and tried to do that. Fell short from 2018 guarantee to create 300,000 manufacturing jobs, set out to remove newly made bike lanes, removed rent control, which we are going to get to. And it goes slowed house production. It goes on and on and on. I mean, the spa. So let me touch on, since they brought that up, I'm going to touch on a couple of those issues. But first, this is why Doug Ford won. That hat. Okay, maybe not just the hat. Donald Trump is the reason why Doug Ford won. This is why he called this election early. Because right now, Canada is under threat from Donald Trump. And Doug Ford has been standing with, I want to say to his credit, but of course, unless you're Daniel Smith, you're a complete lunatic. Of course you're standing with Canada. But yes, to his credit, I suppose, he has been standing with Canada. Good job, Canadian. So he has been, meeting with Trudeau and the other premiers to sort of have this Canada First plan where they're putting the country first and all working together, which any of the other leaders in Ontario would have done. Of course, as much as I don't like Bonnie Crombie, and we'll get to the fact that she lost her own seat. We'll get to that later, even though Liberals were able to gain seats and become an official party again. Even though I got some issues with some of the other leaders, they all obviously would have also worked with Trudeau and the other premiers in a Canada First approach. And by the way, I'm not going to talk much about him in this video because the Green Party isn't all that powerful or not powerful at all. But Mike Schreiner, I think, was the best in the debate, had the best plans, is somebody that if he ran as the NDP leader, I think they would have a real shot at forming government. But I understand, I don't think he has any interest in doing that. But Mike Schreiner is somebody who I think is able to connect both with his issues and with people in a way that the other leaders can't. Except for Doug Ford, and it's unfortunate that he's stuck in the Green Party. But this gets to a part of Doug Ford's speech, which, again, highlights why he won this race.
Donald Trump thinks he can break us. He thinks he can divide and conquer, pit region against region. Donald Trump doesn't know what we know. He is underestimating us. He is underestimating the resilience of the Canadian people, the Canadian spirit. Make no mistake, Canada won't start a fight with the U.S., but you better believe we're ready to win one. So, folks, let me be clear. Canada will never, ever be the 51st state. And Canada is not for sale.
So as somebody who is very aware of Doug Ford's scandals and his many issues and the many problems that he has brought to the province, that comes off well. That kind of speech, countering Donald Trump in that way, is a great way to appeal to your average voter who may not be politically aligned with any particular party, but likes the cut of his jib. Like this, Doug Ford comes off as a guy who just cares about Canada and cares about the people. if you do any reading at all about anything, then you're aware the amount of bullshit underlying all of that. I mean, the Canada Not for Sale had. How about Ontario's Greenbelt for sale? The Ontario Place for sale. Ontario's Healthcare for sale. Service Ontario Centres for sale. All of those are apparently for sale to corporations, but Canada Not for Sale, it's a nice hat. Like, it's just, it's marketing. He's good at just appearances. He's good at that stuff. He does not come off as somebody who is your standard cookie cutter politician, even though he is worse in many ways than your cookie cutter politician. But that's the appeal of Doug Ford. Now, all of that despite the fact that Ford, he was caught in a hot mic. This is recent. So Richard Southern of City News shared this clip. Watch this.
Was I happy this guy won 100%? I was. Then the guy pulled out the knife and fucking yanked it in.
Talk about a lack of judgment. Doug Ford was still a Trump supporter when Trump won the election. This recent election, still supported Trump and was surprised that Donald Trump did what he was saying he was going to do when he was running. Trump tariff proposal could cost Canadians $1,100 per year. This report from October 8th, a month before the election. Yet Ford was happy when Trump won. None of the other party leaders are Trump supporters or were Trump supporters. Yet Doug Ford is uniquely positioned to combat Trump, the guy that has been fooled by him since 2015. Let me focus on a couple other issues now. Ford-specific issues, because this one is wild. 1/4 of Toronto's condos now exempt from rent control following a 35% hike in rents over 6 years. So the Ford government removed rent control for new units on November 15th, 2018, just months after taking office the first time. Now rents have spiked, leading to skyrocketing evictions because people can't afford to pay for those rents. And a new study by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario reveals that homelessness is surging across Ontario. 81,515 people experienced homelessness in 2024, the same as the entire population of Peterborough. That's a 25% increase in 2 years. So Doug Ford puts an end to rent control. More people are now out on the street. They are now living in encampments. So there were 1,400 encampments across the province in 2023. Shelters throughout the province are full with some 12,000 people in Toronto's shelter system alone. So what is Doug Ford's solution to this problem that he helped to create? Dismantling homeless encampments. In fact, proposing a bill that gives police the authority to ticket people for the consumption of illegal drugs in public space with penalties of up to $10,000 in money they don't have, or up to 6 months of jail time. Throwing people in jail because of the problem that you helped create. It can often be hard to encapsulate how horrific conservative policy is for the average person, but a story like this does it. Now, the cost of housing, of course, isn't just Doug Ford's fault, but ending rent control clearly has led to a situation where there are a lot of units now. We're talking, over 3,000, 3,000, 4,000, 3,000, 6,000, 5,000 since 2018 that have been built that have no rent control. That clearly has led to exploding rents and people unable to afford to live. It's hard to describe the kind of evil you have to be to help create a situation like this and then make it illegal for people in the situation that you put them in. Now, this gets to the other insanity. This 95-year lease for Ontario Place. Canada Not for Sale, but Ontario Place is to an Austrian company. A 95-year lease is wild. But the cost of this, according to an Auditor General report, is $2.2 billion. So $2.2 billion spent on this mega spa. That's what this is, a mega spa. Yet, $1.8 billion on healthcare. Doug Ford putting less money into healthcare than a mega spa in downtown Toronto. And we're supposed to believe this is for the people, as opposed to for the elites and his rich corporate buddies. Last thing here, Bonnie Crombie lost her own riding. This is the Liberal Party leader. Nate Erskine-Smith really should have won the Ontario Liberal leadership race. Bonnie Crombie moved right and acted like that was the way. We're going to win people over with more right-wing economic policy, and that's going to appeal to them. Meanwhile, she can't even win her own seat. She's apparently staying on, though, as the party did achieve official party status with the 12 seats. I think they have 13 seats now. So congrats, I suppose. Ontario politics, man, is just so so messed up. There needs to be a stronger vocal opposition. Merritt Stiles seems like a nice person. I don't think commands the camera in the way that you need someone to, or connects with people in the way that Doug Ford does. For all of his faults, Doug Ford comes off like a guy you could have a beer with, and that is appealing to a lot of people. There needs to be that sort of person, just a normal person, but with politics that are actually good for the vast majority of people. So until there is a leader, a party with that kind of leader, we're just going to continue seeing this kind of result.